everybody. My name is James Boldin. I teach here at the University of Louisiana, Monroe, and I'm going to talk to you today about the LMEA Set 3 horn etudes for 2022-2023. So here are some of my performance tips for Coproch, page 24, number 34. This is the Allegro. So the first thing I would recommend that you do is number your measures if you haven't done that already. You should have 40, not counting the pickup measure and not counting the repeat. One really great strategy that I use all the time when I practice difficult technical things like this is to break it up. Think of it like a large meal. There's no way you would try to take one big bite and eat an entire meal. You'd break it up into smaller bite-sized chunks. So I would suggest dividing it into 4 measure sections and practicing each section one at a time. You might even practice them on a loop. For instance, you might practice measures 1 through 4, then go back and practice 1 through 4 again, and so on and so forth. You could even work backwards. Start with the last 4 measures. Then the last 4 measures, once they're set, you do the 4 measures before that, and so on and so forth, till you've put this thing together seamlessly. What I do not recommend is trying to play through it all just a bunch of times in a row. That's a very haphazard way of learning. I would suggest a metronome marking of around quarter note equals 88 to probably no more than 92. But in fact, when you start practicing this, and when I start practicing something like this, I slow the tempo way down. Think more like quarter note equals 60. And that's going to seem absurdly slow, but that's the point. That's like putting it under a microscope so that you can hear every single detail. And then once you get it where you want it, you start speeding it back up. Other performance or practice tips: change the articulations and rhythms as much as you need to really learn this on a deep level. When you're practicing it and also when you're performing it, exaggerate the dynamics as much as you can. So much of that can get lost in a technical etude like this, but be aware of your dynamic changes. Breathing, that can be an issue in an etude like this Coproch where there's hardly anywhere to breathe. Sneak them in where you can, where they make musical sense, while maintaining the tempo and the forward motion of the music. Keep it light. I try to think like a woodwind player on something like this and less like a brass instrument. Try to avoid heavy tonguing if at all possible. In measures 21 through 25, keep the quarter notes on beat 3 full value. After all this sort of slur 2, tongue 2, or slur 3, tongue 1 articulations from the previous measures, it's easy to want to cut those quarter notes short. Go ahead and play them full value because that's the way they're marked. Me personally, I don't worry too much about the staccato markings. When I'm playing this, I'm trying to create a steady flowing line with my air, and I think if you're playing lightly, those staccato notes are going to be plenty separated. Another issue with Coproch is endurance. By the time you get to the end, having enough gas, enough steam to get those high A's to come out, if you do end up playing this whole thing, can be tricky. So one strategy is to work from the end backwards so that you're practicing the end on fresh chops, and you're kind of mentally training yourself to be strong all the way to the end of this etude. Another thing that really helps me is taking full relaxed breaths as much as you can, even if you're sneaking them in, and then keeping the left hand as relaxed as you possibly can. In a prolonged technical etude like this, it's easy for the left hand to start cramping up. So if you notice your left hand getting tight, let it hang down by the side of your chair just like this, and then bring it up to the horn, and away you go. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Shoemaker etude, page 18, number 14, Andante con sentimento. As with the Coproch example, I recommend that you number your measures. You should have about 62. One great way to practice pretty much anything on the horn, but especially lyrical pieces like this with a lot of flowing lines, is to buzz the mouthpiece and sing any of the difficult slurs or intervals. There's a lot of wide slurs in this, and you just want them to be as clean as you can. So buzzing them first, singing them, and then putting them back on the horn. Related to that, every note should be resonant. Even though there are some staccatos, you don't want them to be clipped too short. Think of the way a fine singer would sing through this. And it might even be helpful for you to make up some words to go along with it, so you can practice this away from the horn by singing it. The accent should be more air and less tongue. It's tempting to want to really hit these accents too hard. So remember that however much tongue you put behind an accent, it should always be balanced with the air. Pay close attention to the phrase endings. Some of them are marked staccato and some are not. And I think we want to play the ink as much as you possibly can if you're preparing something for an audition. Don't try to overinterpret things that aren't actually in the music. Play exactly what's there. Even though this is a lyrical etude, I highly recommend that you use a metronome for your practicing probably 90 or 95% of the time. That'll keep you honest and make sure you're not slowing down or speeding up too much and straying from the tempo that the composer has specified. Related to that, keep it moving. Don't get too bogged down. Remember that even though the tempo marking is andante, there's a con anima. So with some life, with some forward motion, and I think you'll be just fine.